welcome to the scientific and regulatory session. Wherever you are joining us from in the world, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. On behalf of the INC, I'd like to thank everyone for partaking in today's session. Before moving on, I'd like to cover some housekeeping. I'd kindly like to remind everyone that this session will last 1 hour, and due to the conference's scheduled program, it is very important that we keep the allotted time for this session. The 3 guest speakers will each share their presentations, and with the remaining time, we will do some Q&As. As we are having some technical difficulties with Mr. Golubiewski's camera, he will proceed without a camera, but it's no worries. Furthermore, this session is being recorded and will be published to the Netflix area of the online sessions website. Now, I'd like to introduce the chair for this session, Mr. Pino Calcagni. Mr. Calcagni is the chairman of the INC's Sustainability, Scientific, and Government Affairs Committee, and he is a current executive committee member of the INC. Thank you for being here with us today. The floor is now yours, Mr. Calcagni.
So, dear honorable speakers, dear INC members, and dear participants, it is a pleasure to be tonight with you again. And like every year, and thank you for your presence till now. I'll be very patient for yesterday and today. But tonight is a great opportunity because we have 3 very high-profile speakers who are for the first time participating to our Congress and tonight our webinar. Mr. Maciej Golubiewski, head of the cabinet and of the Commissioner of Agriculture for the European Commission. Mrs. Diane Holdorf, Managing Director for Food and Nature, World Business Council for Sustainable Development from Switzerland, and Mr. John Carter, Area Europe Quality Director of Ferrero Group, Luxembourg. So we have a fantastic possibility to turn the scientific momentum, which is not only scientific but also regulatory webinar. I remind you that our committees, they are covering sustainability. As well, we are covering the statutory matters within the INC. So I am very happy to introduce immediately Mr. I don't see at the moment, Mr. Maciej Golubiewski. Are you online?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here. Thank you.
My pleasure. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me try to connect. I think I can. My camera should be working. At least it was working for. Oh, 1 second. Well, I don't know. My camera is still having problems. In any case, thank you so very much for this invitation. I'm very honored to be with you. Unfortunately, you cannot see me. And I did get my camera to work a minute ago, but seems to be a problem. Very honored to be here with you. And I would like to talk a little bit about what's been happening with sustainable agriculture during the COVID crisis, and also talk a little bit about our new approach as the EU to sustainability that was presented in the so-called Farm to Fork strategy that was adopted by the Commission, European Commission, just a few months ago. Well, it's been my first year as the head of cabinet of Commissioner Wojciechowski in charge of agriculture and rural development, and it's been a very challenging year, I have to tell you. The COVID crisis has demonstrated, first and foremost, the importance of European food production. And I have to tell you that importance of functioning of the food chain, the single market, as well as the smooth trade operation. I have to tell you that this particular aspect has performed exceptionally well, given all the problems that you well know connected to the crisis, including supply chain issues, clog-ups, and so forth. But the coming year is also going to be very interesting. While the COVID crisis is still, unfortunately, with us, we have several important decisions to take First on the Common Agricultural Policy, which is our flagship policy in agriculture in Europe, and attended and kind of attached to it the From the Fork strategy, which is not per se an agricultural strategy. It is an overall approach to sustainability along the whole food chain, but it puts agriculture front and center. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the COVID crisis and how we as the Commission have been reacting to it. In those very difficult times, in this very difficult environment that we remember and still with us, the agri-food sector actually has shown its resilience during the crisis. The food chain partners have contributed to supplying EU citizens with affordable food and avoided food shortages. There were a few hiccups along the way, but we've managed quite well. During the second wave that we have now, we do not experience the same problems. We learn from experience. The Commission reacted very quickly. We ensured the preservation of the single market through our guidelines on border management. We've developed so-called green lines to ensure unhampered transport of goods, and we also ensure the free circulation of workers, again proving the importance of the single market and that it is actually working even when faced with utmost difficulties. But although the agri-food sector proved largely resilient, unfortunately some sectors suffered more than others. The Commission looked at the situation, evaluated it, and adopted some measures to help sectors that were hit hardest by this crisis. The measures alleviated, first and foremost, the administrative burden on producers and national administrations that manage the existing support programs, as well as the possible cash flow difficulties of producer organizations in the fruit and vegetable sectors, which you're a part of. The increasing spread of the virus has also prompted many countries around the globe to unfortunately temporarily shut down their businesses and restrict travel and the movement of people. So these measures are currently leading to sharp contractions in the level of economic output, household spending, investments, and international trade. For the EU 27 member states, the predicted reduction in trade flows for 2020 is expected to be between 9% and 15% for exports and between 11% and 14% for imports from non-EU countries. This is for both goods and services. But against this gloomy backdrop, I'm glad to report that the agri-food sector performed well in terms of trade. The latest official figures show that during the first 6 months of 2020, EU 27 member states agri-food trade, which is combined exports and imports, actually increased, reaching a value of around 153 billion euros. This is almost 3% more than in the January-June 2019 interval, and it's driven by both higher agri-food exports and imports. In particular, and quite relevant for your association, the imports of fruits, and we're talking about fresh and dried, including tropical and nuts, increased by an estimated 12% in the first 6 months of this year. The sector has also, then taken much benefit from the emergency measures that we put forward by the Commission on trade facilitation through inter alia digitized solutions to keep supplying the market with nutritious fruits during a period of extended need for a healthy lifestyle. Also, through the initiative of my commissioner, we also supported producers through ad hoc payments, lump sum payments for those who were hit, whose supply chains, for example, were hit by COVID-19. As many member states, as well as other non-European countries, are unfortunately going back progressively to lockdown mode. And unfortunately, in Brussels, we are in a quasi-lockdown mode again. The Commission is intensifying the monitoring of the internal agricultural markets, as well as the trade dynamics, in order to react quickly to any market imbalances, as it was the case with the first wave in the spring this year. So this is kind of how we dealt with the first wave and how we learned from the lessons and how we're approaching it now, hopefully with a view to some sort of a mid-year next year stabilization, and hopefully going back to normal if all the good news coming from the vaccine world come to fruition. But I want to now turn to the farm to fork strategy, which is the core of my presentation, and start with describing a little bit what it's all about. It was launched in May this year, and it is a kind of a whole holistic vision to transform the way we not only produce but also distribute and consume our food. So it's a 360 degrees approach to the whole food chain. The strategy focuses on stimulating food consumption that is sustainable from both health and environmental perspectives. And obviously, the strategy highlights naturally the importance of plant-based diets, including whole grain cereals and fruit and vegetables, including legumes and nuts. So you're in definitely part of a sustainable part of that farm to fork. You're on a good side of the farm to fork strategy, so to speak, as a sector, which is good news. Delivering on this ambitious vision requires a transition at all stages of the food supply chain. It requires efforts, engagement, and responsibility from all actors. This strategy also underlines that in the European Union, the consumption of fruit and vegetables is insufficient, and that it considers reversing the rise in overweight and obesity rates across the EU is critical. Moving to a more plant-based diet with more fruits and vegetables is a central element to achieve this objective. When we were presenting the farm to fork strategy, we were very clear that the EU will not tell or mandate the Europeans what to eat. We're not forcing anyone to do anything. This is an incentive-based strategy. But at the same time, we need to help precisely incentivize the consumers to make more informed choices and to raise their awareness about what it is what is sustainable food choice and what is eating healthier and better. In this context, the Commission will develop more targeted policy initiatives to increase the intake of fruit and vegetables in the EU with the aim of raising awareness and directing policy attention to the nutritional and health benefits of fruit and vegetable consumption. Just to remind you, the farm to fork strategy is a strategy. It's not a legislative document per se. It sets a certain vision with a certain goals, which then will be translated into policy, hopefully via appropriate legislative initiatives, regulations, mainly in EU parlance or directives. As you are aware, having read the strategy possibly, we set ourselves ambitious targets. These are the goals that I discussed just a second ago. These targets are ambitious, and they set the EU, they set such things as a reduction by 50% of the use and the risk of chemical pesticides. Another ambitious target is the reduction of the use of fertilizers by at least 20%, and reaching 25% of agricultural land under organic farming by 2030 already. This is ambitious on the EU scale. Some countries are way above that target, but some are very well behind. So we have to be attentive to differing dynamics, but we hope to be achieving those targets in the coming years. But the strategy also aims at achieving gradually a move towards, as I said, more sustainable food production globally. And I think since we have a global audience, this is very important for you to hear. We would like this move towards more sustainable food to be in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we want to work with the global community on achieving these. This would also maintain a level playing field between the European and non-European producers, importers, and exporters. So this international dimension of the strategy is very important and includes, and I quote from the strategy, promoting international standards and the global transition to sustainable food systems in international standard setting bodies like Codex, as well as having ambitious sustainability chapter in all EU bilateral trade agreements. Through its external policies, including international cooperation and trade policy, the EU will actually try to pursue the development of so-called green alliances on sustainable food systems with all its partners in bilateral, regional, and multilateral fora. This will include cooperation with Africa, our neighbors and other partners, and will have regard to distinct challenges in different parts of the world. Finally, with regards to imports, you know very well that EU is a heavy importer of your products, of nuts and dried fruit. Imported food must obviously continue to comply with relevant EU regulations and standards. However, the Commission will also like to take into account environmental aspects when assessing requests for import tolerances for pesticide substances that are no longer approved in the EU, while of course respecting WTO standards and obligations. This is because certain environmental issues are matters of global concern that go beyond national boundaries. One example could be the worldwide decline of pollinators or environmental concerns with persistent bioaccumulative and toxic substances. On such issues, the Commission thinks that positive results can only be obtained when action is not limited to the European Union alone. In conclusion, I'd like to end here. The farm-to-fork strategy, which I just briefly described, together with the ongoing common agricultural policy reform, will provide a comprehensive answer to the environmental, social, and economic challenges of our time, if it's obviously translated properly through legislation. Looking back in 10 years from now, hopefully I would like to be able to say that we have made good use of the last decade to achieve our long-term goals, notably making Europe the continent with the most sustainable agricultural model in the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Golubiewski, I thank you very much. I appreciate your speech as let's say, international person and as a European. I would like to say right away how good did the European Commission in this pandemic, following farmer, following processor, manufacturer, importers, and our claim has been always studied and moved on. I would like to tell my regret that due to the poor communication at the beginning, I was not mentioning about your very wide experience in the last 3 decades all over the world and in 5 continents. So you are the perfect person as a head of cabinet to the commissioner to know and realize how important is the global trading. And I was revising today the 17 goals of sustainability, and as a man of nuts and dried fruit, I recognized at least 8 points, but from your conversation, they are at least 10 points that we are reaching. Having said that, we will postpone to the question later on, and I would like to introduce immediately Mrs. Diane Holdorf. Mrs. Holdorf, she is a managing director of the Food and Nature of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And if may I play a little bit, she is a recognized superwoman appointed by the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center from part of the United Nations during the International Women's Day in the 2015. Mrs. Holdorf will entertain us about views and prospects on sustainable development in the agro industry. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me here with all of you today. It's really a pleasure to join the International Nut and Dried Fruit Association as you go through what is clearly a very compelling set of events, even though we're doing this all virtually this year. You know, I'm really glad to hear you just touch on the Sustainable Development Goals, because these Sustainable Development Goals really set out a roadmap for all businesses. We happen to think it's particularly important for all of us who are working in the food system across all of these sectors of the value chain to pay attention to both how we succeed as well as how we contribute to achieving these Sustainable Development Goals and mapping our work to that. the global food system has really expanded so significantly, successfully growing to meet the needs of increasing populations around the world. But we're at a point now where we need to be paying attention to how we continue that growth so that we can achieve a world for 9 billion people that is within planetary boundaries. We know that there are some real challenges for the food system. We see these coming out from major scientific and economic reports. We know that agriculture is often pointed to as an area of real challenge for issues related to climate, nature, as well as health, because globally we're seeing current diets resulting in a global health crisis of both over and undernutrition. But this is also a point where we have opportunity. We believe, when we talk with farmers, as all of you do, farmers don't see themselves as being part of the challenge. They all see themselves as being part of the solution. And that is the type of world that we need to also create, the opportunities for them and the opportunities for the businesses all along these value chains. But as we heard, COVID has created some real challenges. The pandemic has shut down early on some key parts of the value chains that make up food distribution, food production, food harvesting. We saw challenges all the way from farm to shelf. And part of what's been incredibly concerning is, although food security has for the most part recovered, we know there are some hotspots still coming. The real challenge has proven to be economic. And while we were already facing a challenge with 1 in 9 people going hungry or being undernourished, by the number of people affected by hunger is actually expected to surpass 840 million. And that number is accelerating now due to COVID. This is an issue that we have to pay very close attention to as an industry and as a sector. These issues that I touched on regarding the planet's natural resources is one of equal concern, because while we're seeing these resources being stripped away at an unprecedented rate, leading to the loss of ecosystems, soil erosion, freshwater scarcity, we're seeing these challenges starting with pressure at farm level. And we know particularly areas of dried nuts and fruits, water is a huge issue, but we're seeing social issues come in as well. Harvest workers, processing facilities, these are all areas that we know need to have particular attention paid so that the sector can continue to thrive. And in fact, it's going to be an incredibly important sector. This was already touched upon a little bit, but as we look at what it's going to take to actually achieve balanced diets for both sustainability and health in the future, we see consistently that legumes, nuts, and seeds and fruits must grow in their production and in their consumption rates. So how we think about this opportunity to both increase and expand production, build and thriving local communities around this, and engage consumers around how we can build further consumption for healthy and sustainable diets of the products from this sector, these are going to create some really big opportunities. They're areas that we're all really looking forward to figuring out how we really support and enable. We've recently published last year we actually put forward a guide for CEOs on what it means to transform the food system. And in that CEO guide to food system transformation, we recognize the need for agricultural transformation, the need for increased equity of livelihoods across the value chains, and this opportunity to improve the health and sustainability of consumption, while of course all working together to reduce food loss and waste, which is another area of always big concern in these areas. And we're starting to bring that now onto what it means to be operationalized. And this ability to look at by region where we need to see growing consumption of products like nuts and seeds and fruits is something that can start to drive both business roadmaps as well as consumer engagement strategies. We'll probably hear about that a little bit more, but these opportunities that it creates at a marketing level for product diversification and development can be quite significant. This aspect I want to come back to, though, is also around the need for paying attention to the social pieces of our value chain. We know that partly due to COVID, but also due to other circumstances, there's been some real challenges around equity and human rights across value chains generally for agriculture, not just within this sector, although, we're seeing this across all agricultural regions. And we know that this is an area that's going to be important for an equitable transition. This is something that the EU, I know, is particularly looking at. UK has taken a particularly strong look at what it means to have a just rural transition as we think about moving forward for what becomes a climate positive, nature positive, and very importantly, people supporting world that we need to move to. So, we've also been thinking through what does it mean to improve human rights policies and practices, particularly at the agribusiness sector level, and building that awareness all the way down to the farm, because that can be quite challenging. So thinking through the toolkits that offer sector-specific lenses that bring forward these opportunities to address human rights issues for the agricultural sector. All of these things can be real tools to supporting what continued growth and development can mean for the sector, and it's one that we really look forward to supporting. We see great opportunity here and growth for the sector. We're excited to see it continue to develop and really pleased to be able to contribute to the discussions here today. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you very much. I was delighted to hear your words, and because I am also a dreamer. I am a positive person on the touching field day by day, but your words are bringing me to the dream of my life, to have nuts and dried fruit worldwide. In my philosophy, we have the duty of the engagement to feed in the next 10, 20, and 30 years 9.5 billion population. And very important that all the Far East countries, which are sharing a very large population and consumer, they are used since 3,000 years. So 3,000 years to eat and enjoy of nuts and dried fruit. The dried fruit because to preserve during the big movement of the nomads and Africa trans movement, and the nuts because they were giving energy, calories, protein, and small quantity to carry on. So that is fantastic. In my dream, I would like to tell you that we hope that one day your important council will accept the INC as your ambassador and to transfer all your points directly to the field and to the transformer and manufacturer. So we are at your disposal.
We look forward to that.
And now I am very happy to introduce John Carter. John Carter is a quality director for whole Europe, Ferrero, Luxembourg, and he has a fantastic career because he has been always a moderating person between the high risk and the low risk to be really at the side of the consumer. So in the 30 years, he has been a champion of this pragmatic management. I leave the word to John, please. He's entertaining us on how COVID-19 and technology are changing food safety, which is the very important point of all these webinars. John, please.
Grazie mille, Pino. Well, firstly, let me say thank you very much. I'm extremely honored, firstly, to be invited to participate in such an esteemed panel. Diane and Maciej, thank you for setting the scene very, very professionally. And also, let me also say that I'm proud of what the food industry has achieved in this year. Part of the message that I want to communicate this evening is that we really stepped up to the plate and proved that we were also worthy of the title of frontline heroes, I think. And my own personal thanks goes out to every single member of the food industry in every constellation for that moment. It was an extraordinary year for the human race, for society, for the planet, and I think so far we delivered. So I actually have a presentation to share. And let me say in the beginning that this is a presentation in two parts. One is a presentation that I've given in the past, looking at the impact of food of technology, on food safety, so separate to COVID, and then a reflection of what happened to my, let's say, vision in the last year as the reality affected us all. So let me just try to share this screen. Oh, now I lost it. Scusa. Can you see this? Can you see my screen?
No, we cannot.
Oh, okay. It worked before, so what am I doing wrong? I can't find it. Oh dear. Should open this. There we go. Now I got it. There we go. So this must work now, I guess. And then we switch to this. Are you now able to see?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay.
Yes,
great.
we can see it.
Okay, so as Pino introduced, I am the Area Europe Quality Director of Ferrero, a major player in this industry, of course, particularly with hazelnuts, but not only. I'm only a new guy in Ferrero, so they tell me I'm at the most dangerous phase after 1 year, where I think I understand the company, and after 10 years, I will start to understand. After 20, maybe I'll have some ideas. So this is a company with a lot of history, of course. So I don't want to dwell too much on the aspects of the Ferrero company, but more on the impacts to the industry. My own personal career has been with a number of companies. I'm British originally, but my own personal Brexit was more than 30 years ago, so I had no vote. I've worked for Mondelez in Europe, Metro AG, retailer in Germany, Kraft Foods in the US, Danone in France, and now Ferrero in Luxembourg. So hopefully there's some credibility in those names on the. And I've also audited in those times as well, nut manufacturing sites. But let me talk a little bit about Ferrero first. So quality for Ferrero is a very, very important aspect, one of the core values of the company. And it's about what the Italians call sacco conosciuto, so a deep knowledge of the raw materials, very, very intense and appreciation of where products come from in order to give the best to our consumers. And this is one of the core values of the company itself. Of course, one of the key differences in Ferrero is a level of vertical integration. So we have, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the so-called HCO, the Ferrero Hazelnut Company, within the control of the company. However, there are Chinese walls in place with this company. I am responsible for, let's say, the execution of quality in the manufacturing area in Europe, which is the greater part of the company. And that means that I have to maintain a certain distance to the hazelnut processing area. So, having said that, my colleagues at the hazelnut company asked me to tell you that the managing the B2B business that they do is exactly the same approach that we receive at Ferrero. So, in terms of quality, food safety, and delivery, there should be comparability and equivalence between all of the products that the hazelnut company produce. When you look at the overarching responsibilities of, let's say, my job at Ferrero, it's an end-to-end experience looking at the supplier qualification, at the incoming raw materials, at how we manufacture our wonderful, delicious products, how we deliver those to our retailer customers, how we manage execution on the point of sale. So every time any one of you goes to buy a Nutella on the shelf or a Bueno or whatever, this is something that we also monitor, and then giving the feedback from the consumer experience into this whole aspect of end-to-end quality. And this is something that, even though I've worked for other companies with similar setups, I would say that Ferrero is very, very strong in understanding and focusing on consumer excellence. The delivery of a perfect product to the consumer is really part of the deep culture of this company, driven by the founding father of the company, Michele Ferrero. But, ladies and gentlemen, I would say that the world is changing even before the COVID crisis. So if you look at what is happening in most consumer goods companies in the last few years, we have seen a number of different trends here. The accelerating pace of innovation, increasingly blurred categories, different consumption habits. Thirdly, and maybe more importantly for this particular talk, the omnipresence of digital and data and what that means for our day-to-day life in quality and food safety and in manufacturing and the distribution of food products. The call for transparency in that as well, which means things like traceability, things like authenticity for consumers. The way that regulators, such as folks like Maciej representing here, are evolving and managing the consumer representation of compliance to the law, both in food safety but also in sustainability aspects. Some of the sustainability things that we are dealing with, the move towards organics, the reduction of plastic and so on. Clearly, these are huge trends to be recognized and reacted to within companies like Ferrero and other food companies. And then finally, you can't do this without making enough money to reinvest in the business. So the pressure for efficiency. So this is the sort of the context, if you like, of a changing world in which we are operating. And I like to think that in this world, there are three big trends which I would identify, which are changing the way that I have to do business. What I would call the vision of big data and social media. The first is the revolution in analytical capability, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure if you can imagine what it was like when I started my career 30 years ago, but what we can do now into things like whole genome sequencing, not only, but also to understand the origin of raw materials, whether there is any level of contamination, whether we are looking for residues of pesticides or authenticity of products. This is something that is becoming fast, real time, and maybe even faster with the developments of PCR testing that we are having now with testing for things like COVID. I just had my 12th COVID test today, by the way. Luxembourg is doing a lot of testing. And the results were here within 24 hours. So it's really something that is a turnaround where consumers can expect a very quick result. And this is applicable in many, many industries, including ours. Secondly, the industry 4.0 and the Internet of Things. The fact that if you imagine the terabytes, the gigabytes, whatever the next one, petabytes is of data that we have available in our supply chains, whether this is a factory or in a truck or in a processing facility, you have billions and trillions of sensors who are capable of collating and transmitting data. And so far, we are trying to understand what that means in terms of managing, in my case, for example, the quality and food safety of a manufacturing site. And lastly, and in principle, the ability to understand in real time what consumers think. Our industry, particularly my industry, my job, has historically been driven by metrics like consumer complaints, where we have a product, we launch it on the market. After a couple of months, we maybe see if anyone likes it, if they dislike it, what's wrong with it. This is transforming from what used to be when I started my career, writing letters into a company, you remember those days, to a real-time conversation which you can monitor in the internet. And this is something that is absolutely has powerful transformation, positive and negative. The quality of data is quite often, frankly, unusable. but we still need to be able to understand and drill down to see what's going on. So put these three together, effectively you have the effect of big data on managing food safety in our industry, the tsunami of data. Having said that, I put an asterisk at the top here where it says the vision, and this was pretty much a 2019 vision. So what I'd like to do now, and forgive the clumsiness of the charts, is I want to react to this little fella. What happened with COVID in this year, and how did we react? So I was part of a cross industry working group linked to the EU, where we looked at what the digital transformation of food quality and safety happened during this crisis. And I've managed to put together some rather rough thoughts, frankly, based on an article that I wrote in this time. Firstly, the world. If you think about it, the production of food defines our world, and landscapes and societies are profoundly influenced by our need to feed a growing population. Much, however, and I think this is also mentioned by my two colleagues, has been taken for granted. And consumers don't necessarily know, frankly. And there's a Q&A in the panel I've already seen. That they don't know where our food comes from. They don't know where nuts are grown. They don't know where even milk comes from, where cocoa beans come from. They don't have this knowledge, and this has somehow started to change with the COVID situation. And COVID has been the catalyst. The pandemic forced, of course, populations into lockdown, and the economic activity of our society shrank to essentials. As I said earlier, healthcare professionals were deemed frontline workers, but so were food industry. And as I said again earlier, I thank everyone in your industry, in your companies, for your efforts in keeping food delivered. You maintained operations. Retailers ensured a continued food supply to their consumers. We saw huge differences, by the way, in consumer behavior, focusing initially on what we call pantry loading, where people bought a lot in the beginning, not only toilet roll, also Nutella, by the way, and later on home food preparation. So we saw a huge increase in home socialization, which replaced the eating out of home, which was happening before. And technology has played an important role in enabling this business continuity in the new reality. And it was this technology predominantly that caused our changes. I would say for Ferrero, and this is probably common to many companies, we updated not only our technology in the beginning of the crisis to be able to compensate for the fact that we couldn't physically meet, but also our attitudes to the possibilities of remote working. You would not believe how difficult it was to get permission to work from home in this company before March. Very, very difficult, almost unheard of. And now, of course, it's a different world. These video communications enabled, in my mind, a new discipline of transparency in fighting a common foe, and that means the virus and not the auditors, engendered a strong team spirit. I think that especially in the early phases of the crisis, decision-making was very quick, very, very pragmatic, to use the word that Pino used about me. So very pragmatic, very swift, and allowed us to do the right thing quickly. We now, by the way, I don't know if this will have much traction after the crisis, but we have the ability to have things like virtual quality audits as a valid and realistic alternative. And also, now that we use these things for almost everything, we start to explore, so what can we do with our phones while we are mobile, while we are in a production environment, while we are in a retail environment? When, in my function, I'm looking for problems, I'm looking for risks, I'm looking for solutions to those problems. And that can be communicated extraordinarily faster than the way it was before. So the early effects have been, let's say, cultural. People have been able to work closer together in collaborative teams. We saw a need for, I would say, rapid, reliable, analytical methods. not only for COVID, although this helps, of course, but the precedent that we have in terms of testing is something which we can reinforce. So we really started to look at significant investments in speeding up our turnaround times for rapid analysis, but also video communications, and also even prosaic things like documentation management. Instead of signing exceptions or derogations and issuing them via a file and then scanning them in, we were significantly speeding up our workflow tools for quality management. Having said that, we needed humans to look at all this data. So when I described the big data tsunami before, what I really was referring to was the possibilities for artificial intelligence to interrogate this data and tell us what to do. The thing is, when you have a black swan event, something that is unexpected, the models don't work. Artificial intelligence was not able to tell us what to do next, and we needed to go back to basics in terms of human intelligence, even looking at our commercial decision making, the traceability, market intelligence, forecasting models. When we shifted our portfolio, essentially, if I summarize the crisis for Ferrero in a couple of words, Nutella did very well and Tic Tac suffered. Anything that was on the shopping list, people bought and more. If it was in impulse, in a kiosk, at a checkout, nobody bought anything on impulse. And we needed to react very quickly to those models, to those realities, and our models did not work. It needed human intervention to make the right decision. Also, in a world where the pressure was on, where the pressure was feed the world, just make it happen, make sure you keep running. We didn't take the time to run pilot projects with any newfangled technology. I didn't hear the word blockchain probably for 6 months. The backdrop to this slide is a blockchain diagram, but nobody started talking about the future anymore. It was the short term. But now, ladies and gentlemen, that's the question, isn't it? What happens next? I think we can drive some strategic change from the experiences we gathered in 2020. I think 2020 is our World War II. I think 2020 is our chance to look at what worked and make it happen in the future. So we've proved that we are robust. We've proved that we can be connected and that we can continue to deliver under extraordinary pressure. And I appreciate very much the trust that we had between companies, between functions, between regulators and retailers and manufacturers in order to do the right thing. You didn't hear of one major food crisis in COVID, really, not one. Or maybe there have been something that I missed, but frankly, the focus was not on what our problems were. The focus was on being as constructive, collaborative, and trustful as possible. And that is something to be really proud of. Will blockchain speed up those decisions in the future? I don't know. Do we need increased cybersecurity to protect our data? Could be. What role will artificial intelligence play in the future? And indeed, which is a big one, they are still asking us to come into work in the office. I'm still wearing a tie and putting my suit on in the morning to come to Casa Ferrero in Luxembourg. But what is the future of work? Companies all over the world today, and yours, I'm sure, is no exception, are dealing with this reality. What is the future of work in this new paradigm? So my last slide, just to summarize, if you like, my thoughts. Any crisis presents both challenges and opportunity. And for those of you that don't speak Chinese, this is the Chinese characters for crisis, which represent problem and opportunity. The global COVID-19 crisis confronted our planet and our human race with both of those things in spades. In 2020, we've been given a glimpse of the future, partly thanks to the technology that we were using this year. And now we have a window of opportunity to enable, I hope, and I strongly believe, positive change. And perhaps, listening to the Maciej and Diane talk about sustainability in their talks just now, that we in the food industry have an obligation to use the human learnings of this crisis, to help deliver that change. Because, after all, the production of food defines our world. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I have no word to explain my satisfaction, because in less than 1 hour, we moved through the rainbow of our nut and dried fruit world, from agriculture to sustainability, to the large manufacturer, to touch the final consumer. And what is so important in your conclusion, world is changing. So my dear INC friends, members, remember this, world is changing, and the COVID-19 maybe is the milestone of a new era. Therefore, we need to dedicate more and more and to continue this fantastic activity that everybody of us is daily doing, because we have the obligation to feed the world with excellent products. I have now 10 minutes before closing, and I have here on the screen 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. I will try to wrap around and give the question as they are coming. One of these, it is pretty simple, and I turn immediately to John. The absolute quality that you were talking from the side of a large manufacturer, how much it costs? We don't ask you real money.
It's not the first time I'm asked this, Pino, but the usual answer I give is that this is not a cost, this is an investment. And I think the companies that really take quality and consumer quality seriously. Hey, Maciej, we can see you finally. Nice to see. It requires resources, definitely, to manage quality and to manage quality at a very high level. But it's worth it. So the consumer, I think probably Ferrero has a higher investment in quality than most companies, if not all. I have some benchmarks, and yet we are very, very successful. It has to be said. So I think there's a correlation between the two, quite frankly. So if you're not spending enough, you should be. So
very clear. I have here another 2 questions that we can combine, because I believe is more or less the same. And this is for Mr. Golubiewski. From farm to fork will be a very big challenge for all involved. This may have an impact in consumer prices, but also productivity and supply may get in trouble. In Europe, we are not in position to produce enough of what consumption requires. Europe will also compete with other consuming countries in the world, and namely China, for example. How will European Union make the consumer aware about better diets and healthier, sustainable food? It is all comprehensive. The alternative of that was anyway the strategy of the farm to fork will be beneficial for the European tree nuts and dried fruit sector.
The second one, absolutely yes. I'm glad that we can see each other, that you can see me finally. The first question, very, very complex indeed. Maybe I'll go straight into the question in the question, which was how the consumers will be incentivized or led to better diets. Obviously, there is, at least in the short term, a real risk, or even it will happen, that the prices of food, obviously any organic or sustainably produced food, will raise the price for the consumers. Why would anybody want to buy higher priced food? It's not. It's oftentimes it's considered as a hobby, right? Those who want to be healthy, they can afford it, they do it. No, I think what we do. One element is the promotion policy. We do promotion of our foods externally to the third countries and internally. This promotion is always accompanied by awareness-raising campaigns. So we try to talk to our consumers and try to guide them. There are obviously elements of food labeling that we're considering as part of the Farm to Fork. It's controversial because there are many different schemes. We'll see these will be mandatory, but there is a lot of those. Also for the external consumer, we are promoting the whole geographic indication, high quality schemes for food. We have SPS standards. Here, the promotion of this awareness is done through our free trade agreements, through our sustainability clauses, and in that way try to influence the whole global system, because we ourselves will not survive just by setting high standards for ourselves. We need to work with the others to convince them that having higher dietary standards and production standards for food are beneficial. So this consumer awareness is not just a local policy, but also in our external positioning. When it comes to our competitive edge in food, I mean, we obviously, I could argue that we could feed ourselves. We are the largest exporter of food. Our trade balance is over 30 billion euros in export, above exports, above imports. In our total 170 billion trade relationship with the world, we obviously import a lot of inputs for our food production. But I don't think there is nobody wants to just be in an autarky, but at the same time, I don't think this is the goal. We want to, as I said, in our trading relationships, ensure the sustainability standards are increased. When there was an element in the question about agriculture's contribution to emissions. Yes, indeed. I mean, agriculture is not the biggest culprit. It's different. I mean, there are different estimations, 10%, some say a bit larger, in terms of agri contributions to GHG emissions worldwide. But it is still a problem. I mean, we are part of the overall picture, so we need to pay in our bit here. But I agree, we are not supposed to be the my commissioner obviously is very clear that the agriculture is not the whipping boy for the world's emission crisis, and that's not how the sector sees itself. And I don't think that's what Farm to Fork is primarily about. I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of elements in the question.
Thank you very much indeed. We have another 3 minutes, and I have another 2 questions that I condensate in one for Dr. Holford. What do you think they are the most effective strategies to change the people diets toward more nutrition and sustainable food? I think that the question is also giving the best easy reply for Diane.
Thank you so much. I think changing consumer behavior, we all know, is one of the most challenging areas of work. We all have individual choices driven by family and cultural experiences. But what we also know is that there's a combination of awareness and education, as well as shifting availability. Their availability and what's promoted can be incentivized through a number of different means. I think, Maciej, as you were talking about several from a policy standpoint. There's also the opportunity to really think through what comes forward at shelf. John, you were making really good points around how consumers shifted their decision making versus planned versus forgot the word that you used, but when you make a last minute decision at the checkout.
Spontaneous, unplanned.
Spontaneous, yeah. Right. And so if you can inform what's changes as availability for the spontaneous purchases, you can often start to change what people find is interesting and attractive. So at every point along the path here of the value chain, there's real opportunities to create consumer facing benefits and awareness. The one thing I would say is that we can't just rely on consumer behavior alone. It does have to come with some of these other portfolio and policy shifts to really help to drive overall consumption changes.
Exactly. So we are almost on time. I thank you so much, all of you. You have been enriching us by your speech. And I would like to remember to my colleagues and friends that INC is at your side to help in smart agriculture worldwide, global hazelnuts project, fund to fork in many details, and support the INC also to facilitate with governmental authorities and highlight the importance of nuts in our sector. All the best. Thank you very much. Have a good night and to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks all.
Grazie
Thanks for
mille.
having us.